We are under 2 weeks, and some new early day voting, some early voting records have come out, and you're going to be blown away at actually what they're telling us. Mark Halperin has that. And again, remember, this is from someone who is not a true conservative. So we need to discuss what he just said. That's eye-opening. Not only that, we're going to talk about what RFK talked about and dropped when it comes to the directive of the Department of Defense. Now, we briefly talked about this the other day, but we need to discuss a little bit more, because if Kamala somehow pulls this out, how safe are you as a conservative Christian or conservative and willing to speak your voice on these platforms? Because it just got exposed that they're trying to shut down X. There's a lot going on. And when we talk about either goods or bads, Trump or Kamala, you need to be prepared, because either you're going to see someone win maybe that shouldn't have won, or we're going to see someone win and then riots are going to take place because the left are going to go nuts. You need to be prepared. Let's talk about those 5 things too that I would make sure I had today. Don't let it come to November and you say, you know what, I don't have them. Be prepared. Let's dive into these stories today. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to the channel, please go down here, press subscribe, comment below that you're new. We'd love to hear that you're new. But also, if you've been here for a while, give us a thumbs up if you like today's content, and also tell us what your thoughts are on some of these things that we're going to be discussing today. Now, I want to bring up the fact of something that we talked about with the Department of Defense directive the other day. I mentioned it, I talked about it, but I didn't go in depth on it. Well, RFK is really bringing it to the forefront about this directive. Now, if you want to go back and read it, I talked about this directive just the other day, and I gave you the number for it. It's 525001. What this actually does, and this is what RFK was saying, he was saying that I'm going to warn you because ultimately the Department of Defense under Harris just legalized the ability to confiscate, murder, and take over American citizens' rights and American soul rights before the presidential election. Democrats are being extremely dangerous. I told you they'd pull out every step. Now, just this last few weeks, they've had Kamala come out and state that, you know, that she wanted to get rid of X because of misinformation. You had Hillary saying that we should lock people up for this. Joe Biden came out yesterday and said that we should lock Trump up. And they're the ones calling him a fascist. Isn't that unbelievable? Not only that, you saw the fact that UK is sending people over here, the Labour Party, to help bring Kamala a victory. At the same time, they're doing the same thing, trying to shut X up, freedom of speech. This is what we're dealing with here. And this is what RFK was trying to warn. He was saying, look, she is going to open up the fact that this gives her the right. This directive, if you read it, this directive gives the right for martial law. This directive gives the right to harm Americans without due diligence, without going before the courts. This is what this directive would do. And you know what? No one's talking about it. Congress is not doing anything about it other than like some random 1 or 2 people talking about it. This is a big deal. And we need to make sure that we bring attention to it. And here's the thing. You've got 1 or 2 ways this is going to transpire. If Trump wins, I hope he wins in a landslide. And I believe he will if it's an honest election. And the thing is this, though. If he wins, you know the cities are going to burn to pieces. You know there will be riots in the street and they will declare curfews and martial law. This gives them the right to do that. Not only that, this also gives the right that if she chooses to shut everything down previous to the election or up until the election or after the election, she can do that. And Biden can do that because they have the right to do it under this directive. And what they can do is claim that it's misinformation, disinformation, bad for the economy, bad for the world, bad for America. They can use all these terminologies and ultimately shut you up and shut me up. This is the power we've given these people. And again, Congress is not doing jack crap about it. That's what blows my mind. Our representation is not representing us at all. So I love the fact that RFK is bringing it to the forefront. Not a lot of people's talked about it, except for people like us, but to be honest with you, we don't have the platforms like RFK does, so I'm glad that he's bringing attention to this directive. Now, that's one thing that we need to worry about, because within 2 weeks, you need to have the things that you need, and we're going to go through that list in just a second. But I want to bring up something Mark Halperin just shared. 2 things, actually, Mark Halperin just shared, because it's a balanced approach, and from a man who actually is not a conservative. Mark Halperin came out and said this was a Zero Hedge article. It says, this is startling. GOP early voting turnout in Nevada has amazed all these observers and alarms the Democrats. Warning lights have been flashing for the Democrats for the 2024 dashboard. And now the new one is that these pre-votes, these early votes, these states that are swinging are actually coming out for Trump way more than traditional. They're seeing the GOP numbers looking phenomenally well. Now that's a pretty big deal, especially in Nevada. Mark Halperin brought this up on Tucker. He said of all the 7 swing states, Nevada is probably his weakest link for some reason. I don't know why, but he said based on the numbers, that's the one that they're trying to pull the most, and that's the one that they seem to be struggling in the most. Actually, over Pennsylvania, over Wisconsin, over North Carolina, and Georgia. He said this was the one that they were more vulnerable in, that Kamala had a better hold in. Well, all of a sudden, Nevada numbers are actually coming out, and the early votes are for Republicans and for Trump, even down ballot. And this brings up crazy panic with the Democrats. Now, everything this week has been that Trump is Hitler, he's a fascist. They're actually, it blows my mind. Now there's this news story that he was tied in some Epstein scandal from 30 years ago with this other woman. Now, I want you to think about this. Trump's been in politics for 8 years. He's been a billionaire for his whole life. He's went through 3 campaigns, and the month before, when he's dominating, this story just happens to come out. This is the thing you got to watch for the next 2 weeks, is what comes out the next 2 weeks is a bunch of hoopla. Because for 8 years he's been in the limelight. For 78 years he's been in the limelight, basically. And you're telling me now, before an election, 2 weeks, that all of a sudden this new, just earth-shattering news is going to come out? Man, they've brought up things about funerals, about veterans, about this lady, about Epstein. I mean, they're going to bring it all out. They're not going to hold any punches because they want to win, and they'll do anything to win. Now, that's why I want to bring up these next things. This is why you have to prepare, because you have one party who will do anything to win. Lie, steal, cheat, it doesn't matter. Then you have the other side who, if they win, which they should, in a landslide, Trump and the Republicans, then the cities are going to burn. So let's talk about 5 things that I would purchase today if I were you. And this should be representation of, especially for people in the cities. Number 1, I would make sure that I had protection. I'd make sure I had my windows and my doors guarded in some way. Now, if you're seeing right behind me, that's security screens. Now, if you don't have security screens, it's a little too late to order them for 2 weeks, but that's metal security screens. But I've seen tons of cities already boarding up their buildings with wood to protect from riots and the dangers of what could happen in their cities. Not only that, have you thought about buying protection for yourself? If it's pepper spray, if it's a lead pipe, if it's a bat, or if it's something else such as the self-defense tool for 2A, the brass projectiles that go out of them. You need to make sure you understand that you need to protect yourself. Now, secondly, medicines. Right now, China is doing crazy things. Crazy things. And guess what? If we need medicines and all of a sudden the cities are in riot, how are you going to get to those places? The Walgreens, the Rite Aids, the Walmarts. Again, I told you that there's a lot of places starting to shut down and they're in shortages of medicine. So you need to be buying medicines such as emergency preparedness medicine, or go talk to your pharmacist about making sure that you can have enough to get through the crazy times. Also, number 3, I would make sure that I had gasoline, propane. I'd have fuels. Fuels not only to heat our homes, it's getting cold out there for a lot of places. I think of North Carolina, that's some of the biggest problems they're having right now is they can't stay warm and they can't heat up food. So do you have propane? Do you have gas? We fill up our gas regularly, so we make sure not only our cars are topped off, our small engines are topped off, but we also make sure that our gas cans are topped off. Our propane is always full and we fill it up before it gets to a dead winter so we're not charged a lot of money. But I want to make sure that I have small propane tanks, big propane tanks, and make sure every opportunity of fuel that I need, such as even oils, I have. Because if I have to go somewhere and have to get out of town and I have to move or I have to get away from a certain area for a certain time, the last thing I want to do is try to go to a gas station and try to fill up. Some of the most vulnerable places are convenience stores, and you know that just as much as I do. This is serious because we see the directive, we see the fact that Trump is winning in a landslide based on some of the polling, and you don't believe your cities are going to just burn down to pieces and riots and protests going on? Come on. Number 4, I'd make sure that I had food. So like freeze-dried foods, My Patriot Supply, Legacy Food, any of those are great. And Nutrient Survival, all of them. There's links to some of them below, but you need to make sure that you have some foods that you can utilize. The mistakes that people make is they buy stuff like hominy, and nobody eats hominy out of a can. You need to buy things that you can eat, prepare quickly, but also foods that your family is used to eating. So we can a lot of our food, and Misty talks about it calling the preppers or homesteaders fast food. We can a lot of meats. We can a lot of things that we can just throw in a dish, heat up on the stove, and now I've got a whole meal based on that little bit of propane use or that little bit of electricity use just to get the meal. There was a report of a major blackout and a cyber attack that could possibly happen on November 5th. Now, is that going to happen? I hope not. But again, as a prepper, as someone who thinks through a lot of these things and try to be wise, that could happen. So you need to make sure you have those things. Number 5, I would make sure that I have some kind of CB, walkie-talkie, ham radio, or satellite phone, or all the above. You'd be surprised how much radius you have with a CB or a ham radio. Now, I know they talk about getting licensures, and I'm not saying don't get a licensure, but come on. If you've got the technology and you've got the tools and you've got the availability to speak, and you're in a chaotic situation, the last thing I'm worried about is you having a license to run a ham radio. Make sure that you have the things that you need. You can buy, I bought those little biphone, little ham operators or little ham radio CBs online. They're economic, and to be honest with you, they have crazy range. So we utilize them around our farm, but we also utilize them anytime we go somewhere with several vehicles. We're always bouncing and making sure we can hear each other. CBs are huge. Sat phones. I bought a sat phone. There's also a cheaper version. There's those little sat communicators that basically bounce back and forth. Another option I think you've got to have is Starlink. I know it, again, I'd try to buy it now. It may be too late for 2 weeks, but Starlink is a game changer, because when a blackout or something like that could happen and communication ceases, Starlink satellites are above that. And to be honest with you, we're not affected. You know how they're getting through these storms? You know how in Ukraine, how they're fighting these battles with communication? Starlink. Starlink is a game changer, and I think it's one of the best investments I've ever made. Not only for great internet and streaming, but for the safety and survival and prepping needs of my family. So that's really a good list there. But lastly, I'd make sure that I have cash. You need to have cash put up. Now, I tell you all the time you need to buy gold. You do. You need to have real estate, assets, all that good stuff. But when it comes to survival and safety, you have to have cash. Cash is king. If the business doesn't take cash, I wouldn't even support them. They wouldn't even be legitimate to me. I'd want to make sure that I can support businesses that support cash. Now, here's the thing. In chaos and craziness and pandemonium, your cards, your checkbooks, your bank statements, none of that matters. Your crypto doesn't matter. Cash does. So make sure you have a good amount of cash. I always tell people to at least have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses put up. If you can't have that much, that's fine. Put up a month's worth of expenses or a month's salary in just cash, just for safety. If your money goes directly into the bank, that's okay. Pull some of it out and put it in a safe, inconspicuous place in your home or around your home or in a cache of some sort. Make sure that you are protecting yourself. Now, that was a lot thrown at you. But based on these 2 or 3 stories that we just shared, times are not going to get easier over the next 2 weeks, and especially after the election. One way or the other, you're going to have 50% of the populace very upset. There is no kumbaya moment, I don't think, after this election, no matter who wins, because of the polarization and the rhetoric we've heard. So I would make sure that I am prepared and ready to go previous to November. That way you can, if you had to be home, you had to sit at home, you had to go through blackouts, you had to go through crazy election data, you had to go through panic in the cities and riots, that's the last thing I have to worry about. I'm going to protect my home. I'm going to secure my windows and doors. I'm going to have self-defense. I'm going to have food that I need. I'm going to have water, which of course is key. And I'd have at least, if you average it out, I would have 3 gallons per person per day for a month. That's a lot of water, because that's what we need. Studies show that 1 to 3 gallons is what people need, not only to drink, for hygiene, for any other needs dealing with cooking and all per day. So if I have 8 people, that means that's at least anywhere from 8 to 24 gallons a day. If I say a week's worth of that, that's a lot of water. That's 140, 150 gallons of water. Now that seems like a lot, but to be honest with you, you can start buying a few gallons of water or buy those water storage devices like we have talked about. And some of those drums hold 55 gallons and you could stack them and they're perfect. I would have some kind of way to have water. And then we have this little simple mechanical pump. We can pump it right out of those containers and utilize. Survival of the fittest. That was a term we've heard over the years, but in all truthfulness, as someone who sees the writing on the wall and how crazy it's going to be over the next few weeks, I want to make sure I'm prepared. Medicines, foods, cash, defending what I have, and securing what I have. If you can't do that, then you're just sitting there waiting for the government to help you. But if you're thinking truthfully, look at the craziness and the pandemonium that's going on. Don't put your head in the sand and think that it's going to be okay. Would I love to see Trump win in a landslide and people go back to normal and everybody not be polarized on November 6th? Yes, I would love that. But you've already had about 5 states come out and say they will not have election results for about 10 days. Talk about dishonesty and the dangers of an election. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Check this directive out. It's absolutely scary. And if they started going door to door, if they started coming for your communication, if they started taking away your rights for social media, because you protect yourself, you would need these things that we talked about to not bring attention to yourself, to not be out on the road, to not be the gray man that you wouldn't have to get out of your home. You could lock in, hunker down, and protect your family. Serious times calls for serious measures. It's time for us to wake up and realize we are in serious times. This is just in America. This is not talking about the China risk that we talked about yesterday, or the Russian risk, or the Iran risk. This is just what we're going to be facing over the next 2 weeks. Be ready. Blackouts, storms, or riots and panic. No matter what it takes, no matter what it is, you can be ready. Guys, thank you for watching. God bless.